Welcome to the Birth Lounge podcast, an empowering space for expecting and new parents to hear candid conversations with experts, support your mental health, and learn the tips and tricks that thousands of parents have used to craft their ideal birth. We will answer all of your questions, the scary ones and the weird ones, to help calm your fears and feel confident going into your birth. I'm going to help you redefine what birth and motherhood looks like and how to embrace your journey. I've intentionally crafted a list of experts to help you navigate pregnancy, explore your birth options, and plan for postpartum so that it can be a time of soaking in your tiny human. We're going to go there on all the hard topics so that you can dive deep into finding your confidence and freeing yourself from fears around birth. With over 10 years of experience in family education and a master's degree in human development and family studies, I created this podcast as a way to share the resources parents need to make educated and informed decisions about their care in pregnancy and childbirth. This is a birth community driven by evidence-based information and research in hopes to help you explore your options, understand your rights, and know what choices you have along the way when it comes to birth and beyond. I'm your host, HeHe. Now let's get to the good stuff. Jen, welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, I'm so excited to dive into this topic with you, Jen. It is one that I think a lot of people ignore before baby gets here. We don't talk a lot about postpartum, right? Everything's like baby, 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 birth, birth, birth. We have a baby, we get through the birth, and then we're like, oh shit. What are we
Yep.
missing? Oh man, I really am overwhelmed and underprepared, and I should have thought about this more. And so I think you today are going to have a lot of answers for us. You're going to have a lot of insights that people need to hear before their baby gets here. And you have one of the coolest ideas to fix this problem that I have ever heard. But before we do all that, I want to start with postpartum in the US. Let's talk about postpartum in the US because it blows. It sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does. I think a lot of times too, I'll hear people tell me like, oh, I think we're just going to wing it. Even people who maybe have thought about it have thought, oh, I think we're just going to wing it, see how it goes. And then they get into it and it's not what they were expecting at all. And I do feel like there is a lot of talk, like you said, about making a birth plan. You also need to make a postpartum plan. And it's not like you see on Instagram where it's full hair and makeup and you're holding your baby and everything looks beautiful. Although I do feel like in the most recent years that there are a lot more people that are showcasing the reality of it, which is fantastic. It's about time because that's what I see. And yeah, it needs to change.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is a lot of leaking nipples and
Hmm.
tears from you and your baby and maybe your
Hmm.
partner. There might be times
Hmm.
the whole house is crying, even older children,
Hmm.
if you have those. Your dog might be whining along. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's just the whole house. It's a lot of stained clothes and bottles and pump parts and nipple cream and changing your pad and figuring out, oh my God, when's the last time that we ate? Oh my goodness, when's the last time we fed our baby? When's the last time we
Mhm.
changed their diaper? We didn't record that one. Was it poop? Was it just pee? Oh my goodness, it's very overwhelming. So can you set some realistic expectations of what postpartum typically looks like in those first couple days?
Yeah, I think the first day you're still on a little bit of that emotional roller coaster, the hormonal high. You might be tired, but you have this, oh my gosh, the baby's here. This is so exciting. And you're texting all of your friends and sending photos to family. And but that second night, that's where I hear from most people that they're like, how come nobody told us about the second night? Because that's when you start to hit your wall. And what I've noticed is I have a daughter. She's 30 years old. And so 30 years ago, when she was born, and I had a pretty uncomplicated pregnancy, normal birth, but she was born and I stayed in the hospital for about 2 or 3 days and then I went home. That's not happening anymore. I'm seeing people discharged at the 24-hour mark, and sometimes even sooner from the hospitals. I know when I worked as a labor and delivery nurse, we had all this education, this parent education that we needed to do before we could discharge our patients. And I think it's probably still happening. It's a lot to cram into 24 hours for sure. And if you just had a baby, and now you're getting this list of stuff. Okay, do this and do this and do this. You're not going to absorb that. I also attend births as a labor doula, and I literally was at a birth where a nurse was talking about car seat and discharge instructions 10 minutes after the baby was born. I'm like, and I remember looking at her and I'm like, is now the time? I think I mentioned, I said, I don't think they're going to remember any of this, but it's that whole mentality of, okay, we got to get these teachings in so that we can chart that they've been taught, and then we're going to discharge them and they're magically going to remember everything that we talked about. And that just doesn't happen. So I think the postpartum has become like a, all right, here's your baby, go home, good luck, figure it out, we'll see you in 6 weeks. And that gap, in that 6 week gap, there's so many things that could happen with the whole family, the person who gave birth, the baby, the partner. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of pressure too on the partners because they feel like they need to remember all of this. And I've literally seen like the partner standing there with a notepad trying to write everything down. And I'm just like, oh no, this is not the way it should be. We should be supporting them. We should be checking up on them more frequently. I think when I was working in the hospitals as a labor and delivery nurse and I would discharge patients to go home, the looks on these parents' faces, just sheer terror. And they would look at me and be like, so we just go home? What do we do? What if the baby starts to cry? How will I know what to do? And I literally wanted to just like crawl in the car and go home with them, but I couldn't. And I would like just watch them drive off. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, they were not ready. They were not ready to go home. And that's just really hard to witness. And I think that's what started my whole thought process over 20 years ago about how we just need to do better.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It is. So for me, I like that we're getting out of the hospital in 24, 48
Mhm.
hours. That's good, right? That's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Mhm.
But where we're failing is that we don't have any sort of crutch or ladder or anything that bridges them to home and beyond to make up the hospital stay that we used to give people.
Mhm.
It is so sad to me to hear about that dad that was taking notes in a time where he should have just been like present and
Yeah.
relishing with his baby and like
Mhm.
looking at his partner and being like, "Oh my God, you did this. Like, you're the coolest woman I freaking know. This is
Mhm.
amazing." Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, my heart breaks. Okay, so
Yeah.
when we look at countries that do postpartum better, what kind of results are we seeing from those countries and what are they doing different than we do?
I think one of the biggest examples that we can see just on based on statistics is some of the Scandinavian countries. A few years back, I was involved in this program. It was the Baby Box program, which I loved. And so, for example, in Finland, when you have your baby and you're discharged from the hospital, you're sent home with this box. And it's a pretty large box. It's like a little over 2 feet long, about 18 inches wide, and it has a little mattress in the bottom of this box. And it's stuffed with like things that you need for your baby to go home with. But before you can get the box, you have to take a little education course where you have to pass it. And then once you pass it, you get the baby box. And we don't do that in the United States. There's no like course that you take or class or training that you get before you become a parent. We all took driver's ed and then we had to go take our driver's license. And then we were able to drive a car because it's a huge responsibility to drive a car. So, also a huge responsibility to raise a human. But in Finland, their rate of SIDS is 1 to R4. Yeah. And I do really feel like it has a lot to do with the education, has a lot to do with that baby box. The baby box is amazing. It's such a cool little thing to have because no matter where you go, you always have a safe place to put your baby down. So if you go to a friend's house, you just pack the box, take it with you. When you get there, you unpack the box, you have a place for your baby to sleep. You don't have to put them like on your friend's couch or somewhere just random. It is, I do see a huge value in stuff like that. But yeah, other countries that also have like 30 days of when they sit with the new mom and really do a whole wraparound care with nutrition and warming liquids and lots of healing and just somebody in the room with you in case you need something, you know. I don't know, it's here in the United States, I feel you're discharged and you're expected. A lot of people go back to work very soon. I have seen people at the hospital pulling out their laptops and sending emails, and it's not just partners, it's the moms too. They're feeling like they just, I just need to get this to the office, I need to send this email really quick. And so I feel like our culturally in the United States, we have a different approach. And that's one of my biggest goals, is to try to change the whole culture of how we approach postpartum. Because right now we put so much emphasis on the birth, but postpartum is just kind of like you just go home and it's hard and it's a lot of work and you're not going to get a lot of sleep. That's what we tell people. And it's like, why are we telling people that? We should be telling them, like, you go home and you should have people there to support you. And we don't talk about that enough.
Man, yeah. It's called the forgotten trimester, and that's not for
Mhm.
nothing. That is just so sad, all the way from the idea that people come in those first few days after you get home, they see the baby, and then your village drops off. Your doctor is
Mhm.
there every single week, sometimes twice a week, leading up to your
Mhm.
birth. They're at your birth, then nothing for 6 weeks, right? At some point,
Mhm.
your partner goes back to work. If you're super lucky to have that be beyond a 2 week, 1 week, a couple days,
Mhm.
then at some point they drop off. It is so sad. Okay, so before we jumped on, we were talking about the
Mhm.
infant mortality in the US. Talk to us
Mhm.
about what we're seeing, what kind of trends we're seeing, and I'll have questions for you about that.
Yeah, so there was a report that came out recently that said that our infant mortality rate in the United States has increased for the first time in 2 decades. And when the article was first released, a lot of people were trying to blame it on COVID. They were like, oh, yeah, but it's COVID times. And of course, it was higher. But if that were true, then it would have been an increase in infant mortality rates globally, but it was just in the United States. And I do feel like that does tie back to, you just had your baby, you're discharged at the 24-hour mark. I know when we see babies at the retreat center, which we'll talk about in a second, they are coming in at 12%, 13% weight loss. They're
Wow.
coming in with jaundice. The hospitals said, we'll just check on them tomorrow, bring them back tomorrow. So now you have this person who just gave birth, who has to pack everything up, go home, and then they have to pack everything up the next day, go drive to the pediatrician's office, take the baby in. It's a lot to ask of somebody who is sleep deprived, who just went through a major physical change in their body. They're still bleeding, they're trying to lactate, and now we're having them running around town with this 48-hour-old baby. So I feel like when you got to spend a little bit more time and had a little bit more focus in those first few days to get off to a good start, that the rates were much better for infants. Doing the daily weights on the babies, trending, are they gaining their weight back, how's lactation going for mom? So these are some of the things that I think are contributing to that, that we're just not seeing those, the parent and the babies right after they give birth.
I think a lot of it has to do too with that retention that we talked about earlier. If you're still in the haze and the fog and that high
Mhm.
of birth, you're not
Mhm.
retaining anything. They send you home with
Yeah.
this baby. They think they've educated you. You get home and realize, I know nothing. I
Mhm.
retained nothing. I can barely picture that nurse talking to us, much less
Mhm.
definitely understanding what was coming out of her mouth. It all makes so much sense. So you had also talked about moms before we got on, moms that have recently come to the village and needed readmission and they had
Mhm.
some pretty severe complications. Do you think this is because they're being released too early and no one is monitoring them?
It's hard to say because I do think that some of the things that we have seen as far as like postpartum preeclampsia, I don't know if that would have been different if they had stayed in the hospital. It definitely would have been monitored more closely. The whole thing about at the village is that we definitely are educating. I can't tell you how many people have shown up and we tell them like, okay, here's a blood pressure cuff. We're going to show you how to use it. And they're like, why am I taking my blood pressure? I already had my baby. And we're like, because we're monitoring for postpartum preeclampsia and they have no idea what that even is. Nobody explained it to them, or if they did, they're in that haze right after the baby is born. And so we will show them how to do it so that when they go home, they are able to monitor it because postpartum preeclampsia, you're at risk of that for 6 weeks after the baby is born. So we've had two cases that where somebody had to be readmitted to the hospital at the village. And then we had about three or four other cases where it was borderline. And a couple of them, their doctors were able to prescribe some medication to keep the blood pressure under control. And then a couple others, we just helped them monitor it. But the interesting thing was the two moms that got readmitted to the hospital, um, they were readmitted as patients, but the baby is not a patient. So mom gets readmitted, but the baby does not. So now we're having to separate mom and baby
Oh,
at like 3 days, 4 days after the baby is born. And that is really hard to watch. And it's not just mom and baby. Now you have a partner who maybe they're a first time parent and they have this 3 day old baby. They can't lactate. So they're like, how do I feed this baby? So it's a lot of stress. It's really the partners that we focus on at that point because once somebody's readmitted to the hospitals, taking care of them, we shift our focus to the partners doing lots of education. We've even had some dads that we had them sit down and meet with the lactation consultant and just talk about breastfeeding. And we have family therapists that also meet with them. And then the feedback we get from the moms is that when they're in the hospital, they just are more at peace because they know that their partner and their baby are being taken care of 24/7. It's different than having a family member come and stay
mm-hmm.
at the house with your partner and your baby because family members are great, but they're not weighing the baby every morning. They're not like talking about all of the things related to baby care. What is healthy weight gain? What are some things you can do after the baby eats to help with spitting up and all the things that we can show the parents? It's definitely beneficial for them. But yeah, just that peace of mind knowing that like, all right, I have to be readmitted. That sucks, but at least I know that my baby and my partner are being taken care of.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Does it not feel like so barbaric to split families up like that when you could easily take all three family members? Like you're an L&D floor or you're a postpartum floor. You have the equipment. Take the
Hmm.
whole family. That just seems bogus to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. And we try to accommodate, we try to make it like a hybrid as much as we can. Like we'll help the partner pack up the baby, get him into the car seat, help them out to their car. They can stay there during visiting hours and then they go home or they come back to the center. But yeah, it's definitely for me, that was the thing that threw me off when we opened the center. I just didn't really think about that. And maybe that's the problem is people are so focused and you want them to be focused on the patient, of
Yep.
course, but there's more to it. There's the emotional side. So, yeah.
Just like the whole family dynamic piece is incredibly important. And we know that keeping a family together fares better for everybody.
Hmm.
Um, gosh, that just, I feel a little angry actually. I just feel so frustrated. That sucks. It just sucks.
Hmm.
Okay, let's move on to something happy. Let's talk about the village. When you first told me
Hmm.
about the village, we met at the Leela maternity wear grand opening.
Hmm.
And when you told me about your idea, I was like, oh my God, well, it wasn't an idea. It was the village was already made. And I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this is revolutionary. This is what we need. This is the bridge that I had just talked about. Like, we send these people home. That's great. But then there's no one. So tell us about the village. What is it? How did you get started? Where did the idea come from? We want all the details.
Yeah, so I guess it originated way back when I was a labor and delivery nurse. And like I said, I would put these people in the car and send them off. And in my head, I'm like, I go home thinking about them. I hope they're okay. I hope they remember all the things I showed them. So I knew back then it needed to be better. But this was like over 20 years ago. And at that time, I'm like, I'm sure that there's something out there, something will happen, something will come up with something. But then nothing was happening. So it grew when I moved to San Francisco back in 2013. I was working as a pediatric nurse at that time at UCSF. And I was still seeing these parents coming in with these 3-day old babies, just exhausted, stressed, anxious, asking so many questions, but then I would answer them and I could tell it just wasn't sinking in because they were so exhausted, sleep deprived. And then I would watch partners that you could tell there was just tension between them. It's a lot. It is a lot. And then another beautiful thing about San Francisco is that it's so multicultural here. So I started talking to a lot of my patients about culturally, what are some things that you would incorporate into your postpartum? And I started hearing about the Asian traditional postpartum recoveries, Chinese medicine, and also like the 30-day confinement, which was fascinating to me. I was like, what? You can really go down a rabbit hole on that. There's so much about
Okay,
that.
we want to know about it. Tell us about that. What are
I
you talking
mean,
about?
so a lot of my clients, they would tell me like, "Oh, my parents back in China, they want me to do this 30-day confinement, but I'm going to modify it because there's a lot of things like where they don't wash their hair and there's some things that, they're like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to wash my hair, but I'm going to do the warming foods and I'm going to have somebody come and stay in my home for 24 hours a day for the first 30 days." And it was just fascinating to me. So I'm like, okay, how can I help? What are some things I can do? So I started researching. I found that there's some catering companies in the Bay Area that do this specific type of food and they deliver it to their homes. I was looking into confinement nannies is what they call them. And so I felt like I was just like trying to piece it together. And it was good, but I knew it could be better. So I started looking into ways that it's done, especially like in Korea, where people go to this, it's a postpartum hotel where they check
Wow.
in and they are there and they're getting cared for by it's more structured because there were some issues with piecing it together. Oh, if a delivery isn't for whatever reason it doesn't show up that day, or we had one confinement nanny that was flying over from China who never made it to their house. It was 8 years ago. We still don't know what happened to her. So there was some hiccups. So I was like, oh, that's really fascinating. So you have an actual facility where people can check in and it's already all put together for them under one roof. So that was interesting to me. So about 8 years ago, I started looking into maybe this is what I need to do. I need to start to build my village of people and make it a little bit more like for my clientele here what they were looking for because they wanted the postpartum massages, they wanted the food, they wanted the lactation support. So how can I do that and bring it all under one roof so they're not having to drive all over the city to get these, especially right after you have your baby? So I started building it about 8 years ago and then looking for a location, which is not easy to find a 10-bedroom, 10-bath house in San Francisco. But I did find this Victorian home. It's a bed and breakfast. And I was going to launch there. And we were just about to sign the paperwork in March of 2020. And COVID hit.
Womp womp. Yeah, like,
Yeah,
oh my
I know.
God.
I know. built it for years and years. And then, so I was like, all right, we're going to put it on hold. I'm going to continue to work on, because it's just like giving birth. You're never ready to launch a new company. You just have to do it sometimes. So I ended up putting it on hold for a little while. And at that time, it was really hard because it had never been done before in the United States. And every time I would go and pitch it to somebody or talk to somebody about it, they just didn't understand. They're like, oh, so it's like a daycare? No. So it's a medical facility? No. But then one launched 10 months before ours did in New York. Yeah, I know. That was my reaction at first, too. I was like, I've been working on this for so many years, and we were going to be the first. And then the one in New York launched, and it actually ended up being a blessing in disguise that they launched before we did, because they brought a lot of awareness. And when I would tell people in San Francisco about it, they would say, oh, like the one in New York.
Yeah,
And I'm
just
like,
like
yeah,
that.
just like that, but here. So it ended up being just fine. And since we launched, we were the second one to launch in the United States and that was last July of 2023. So we have a birthday coming up next month. And since we launched, there have been, I think, 8 more that have launched. So they're starting to pop up all over the United States, which I'm excited for, because I feel like the more that we put this out there, the more that people are going to start to think, oh, maybe I don't have to go home and just suck it up and have this, I'm exhausted, tired, and I can't enjoy my baby, period. Somebody had said to me one time, which stuck with me, where they said, you take your honey on your honeymoon, so you should take your baby on your baby moon.
Yes, I love that. That is
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. I told you guys this idea is just like so amazing. So I think I have a lot of questions about the logistics. What does a typical stay look like for somebody? And when would I join you at the village? Is it the day I discharge from the hospital? Do I go home? Is it like a vacation a couple weeks later? What does that look like?
So it looks different for everybody, but the stay itself, we focus a lot on resting and recovering and education. So when you check in, you get shown to your room, we get you tucked in, and then we leave you alone for a little bit just so you can, settle in. And then we'll come back and sit down with you. And first thing we do is a kind of an emotional check-in, just to see where you're at. We actually have a little checklist that they fill out, and they let us know where they're at emotionally, mentally, because it's a mental recovery as well as a physical recovery. So we do focus on that. And then we start piecing together. Our parent concierge will have already talked to them ahead of time about, are you wanting massages? Do you want facials? Do you want acupuncture? So when they arrive, we already have their whole schedule filled out. So they don't have to worry about booking that appointment with the lactation consultant. They don't have to worry about booking that massage because it's already done for them. And we lay out their daily routine for them. So in the morning, your breakfast arrives, you have breakfast. Maybe after breakfast, you come down to the nursery and we can do some education. And we just ask them, like, what is it you are wanting? Here's a whole list of things we can teach you. What do you want to learn? So it might be, I want to learn how to diaper my baby. I want to learn how to burp them. I want to learn how to file their nails. So many parents are afraid to file their baby's nails. It's amazing. Just little things like swaddling. We do some more advanced classes, which is like baby wearing class, infant CPR and safety, car seats. So this is something that blew me away. When we launched, a lot of our guests were checking in, and they would say something about, oh, we were so terrified about the car seat. And I'm like, really? Did they show you at the hospital? And they were like, no. So something that I'm finding, which blows me away, because when I worked with labor and delivery, it was part of our education that we did. And we had to watch the parents put them into the car seat, make sure that they knew how to do it safely, watch them put the car seat into the car. So now they still check that you have a car seat, but they aren't able to answer. And I don't know if this is just a Bay Area thing or if it's nationwide, but here they're not able to really answer any questions about the car seat. One of my guests told me that they asked the nurse, "Do we have this buckle done?" And she said, "Legally, I'm not able to answer that for you." I was like, wow. So, yeah, so car seats are another thing that have become a big focus for us, just to make sure that people know what to do. It used to be back in the day, you could just show up at the fire department and they would help you. They can't do that anymore.
Oh,
It's,
sorry to cut you off, but it's so
yes.
weird to me that we are withholding education from parents because
Mhm.
nobody wants to take the liability to
Yeah.
educate these people. Like at the end of the day, you don't want to be the cause of something fatal happening because you didn't educate these parents. That's how I fall. That's where I fall in spec. I'm like,
I know.
let me show you everything. You
Yeah.
should feel confident in your skills. I
Hmm.
want you to know how to. I'm also a certified car seat technician, so I'm not just like some
Hmm.
Joanne on the street, like giving out
Yeah.
advice. But it is weird to me that the people we used to rely on, our firemen, our public safety people, our doctors, are no longer answering questions about education.
No, to me, it's a bigger liability to not tell somebody. Like, I would
Totally.
think when I was working as a nurse, we were trained in nursing school to always think if you were on trial, how would this look? And for me, if somebody were to, if I was to discharge a baby and a set of parents to go home, and I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to answer any questions on that car seat. Good luck. And then they were to have a car accident and the baby were to be harmed, I would think that's a bigger liability because I could
Totally.
just see the judge like, did you show them how to use the car seat? No, I'm not allowed to. So I don't know. That has been something that I just recently discovered, like in the last year, that just is starting to really blow me away. We are like at the village when they are discharged from our facility, we do ask them, how do you feel about the car seat? Do you feel confident? Because some people do, especially
Mhm.
second and third time parents. They're like, I'm good. But those first time parents, if they want us to, we will go down to the car with them. We will make sure that the baby, we do show them like how to put the baby into the car seat, but then we will go down to the car with you and help you make sure that the base is in there and nice and stable. And we do have a lot of hills in San Francisco, so that can be challenging to like make sure that the base is in there
Mhm.
properly. But yeah, we definitely will follow them through with that. So yeah, so the other things that we do at the village would be we have 24-hour kind of postpartum doulas. We call them postpartum care specialists, and they are there just to answer any questions, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 p.m. in the afternoon. You have somebody, because postpartum doulas are great. I have another company, Golden Gate Doula Associates, and we have 42 doulas over there, birth and post. So I love doulas, and I have worked as a doula myself. And postpartum doulas are awesome. I just love them. I think it's also another bridge. It's a shift. So it's a 4 hour or an 8 hour. Some doulas will do more, but usually it's 4 to 8 hour shifts is what we see. So that means for 16 to 20 hours of the day, there isn't somebody in the home that they can just turn to and say, does this look normal? Or what about this poop? Or this umbilical cord looks funny. Can you just take a look at it? So it's, to me, I feel like having somebody there just so you can ask a quick question, get it off your mind, and keep going. So I really love that. I really love having those people there on hand 24 hours a day. I'm usually on site almost every day myself. I teach the infant CPR and safety class. And then the lactation consultant will usually come by and do a visit. And it's not like the visit they get in the hospital. This is like an hour long
Mm.
visit where they'll go into the room, sit down with them, and just really come up with a great plan of care for feeding the baby, whether it's breastfeeding, formula, whatever the parent decides. It could be a combo. So we come up with a feeding plan, and then the lactation consultant will talk to the postnatal care specialist, make sure that they carry out for continuity, because that's another big pet peeve of mine. is when I worked in the hospital, I would come onto my shift and then I'd walk into the room and the parents were so confused because one nurse told them to nurse 10 minutes on each side. Another nurse said, no, just do 30 on one side. And so there's the continuity piece in the hospital is not really there. And that's no secret. Like I talk to nurses all the time, and it's always the biggest pet peeve is I would walk into the room and they would look just so overwhelmed, the parents, and I would just say, what's working for you? Which one do you feel is working best for you? I like it when I feed on both sides. Okay, then that's the best way, not my way. It's whatever is working best for you. And having a lactation consultant come in and sit down with you for an hour and just explore with you all of your options. What is feeling right? What do you need more help with? And then we carry out that plan. And then we might have this isn't all in one day, by the way, because we don't want to overwhelm people, but maybe the next day we have the family therapist just coming in and she'll do a group parent class because we do include the partners in our parent class. I've noticed in some of the other postnatal retreat centers that only the birthing person is allowed into the lounge. And for us, we actually have it set up for both. We even
Yeah.
have a little whiskey bar over in the corner if they
Oh,
want
yeah.
that. We have a library, and the library is for both books for both parents. We even have this cute little button that we give to the dads once they get their swaddle down. It says sexy dads know how to swaddle,
Oh, that's
but they have to
hilarious.
earn the pin. And so it's just all day long. We're checking in with them. We're asking them how things are going. We did have a couple a few days ago that came in and it was so cute. She's still pregnant. She hasn't had the baby yet. And the dad was like, but what are we going to be doing all day? And I'm like, oh, it's their first baby. I'm like, oh, you're going to have a lot to do all day. Trust me, because we don't take the baby and just take them down to the nursery and separate mom and baby. The babies typically are in the rooms with the parents for a majority of the time. And then maybe they just want to take a nap and they can just buzz down to the nursery. They'll come up, take the baby down so you can take a nap or a shower. Or maybe you and your partner just want to have a nice meal together. Like maybe dinner comes and you can have the baby go down to the nursery so that you can just reconnect with your partner for 30 minutes just to take a breath, knowing that your baby is safe down the hall. You can watch them on the monitor the whole time they're in the nursery. So even though the baby's in the nursery, they're not like completely out of their view. They can still check in on them. So that's what a typical day looks like. It's like I said, it's different for everyone. I find that our first time parents typically check in sooner rather than later. We do have people that come directly from the hospital and they just let us know once they're in labor, hey, we're at the hospital, and then we can start to plan. Get those lactation visits ready, get those massages lined up, and then they just let us know, okay, we're being discharged, we're heading your way, so that way we can meet them downstairs in the lobby and then get them up to their room. And then we have some people that do go home for a few weeks and then check in later. Those are typically parents who don't feel like they need that education right away. They're using it more for, okay, we know we're going to need to sleep at some point. Or maybe they have family coming into town for the first week or two and then they all disappear. You know how that goes. And we take up to 8 weeks, in some cases more, it just depends, where you can check in later. So our second and third time parents, what we're seeing is they will check in a little bit later. And the moms are telling me, like, this is the first time I've been able just to lay in bed and hold my newborn without a toddler needing their attention or feeling like there's something else they need to be doing around the house. So to me, that's beautiful because you have that one-on-one skin to skin time with your first baby, and it's so special. And then you have your second baby, and you're trying to get that, but there's just no way with having your toddler in the home. They don't understand. So that to me is really beautiful because you're able to commit that one-on-one time with your second and third baby too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is so well thought out. It really is like the bridge that we keep talking about. Do you allow visitors to come and visit at the village? So if someone did have, let's say they wanted their mom to come or they did
Mhm.
have older children that they wanted to come, is that something that's allowed?
Yes. So we have visiting hours. It's from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Oh,
So
yeah.
around 7, we want things to start to wind down so that people maybe they have a massage or they just want to have a nice dinner and then go to bed. And we highly encourage visitors, but we also tell them, like, hey, if you want to tell your family that there are no visiting hours, that's fine too. Like,
Yeah.
it's whatever you want to do, can accommodate that. But we definitely have a lot of like second and third time parents who the toddler will come by and visit their sibling. And what better place to meet your sibling than at a retreat center versus going to a hospital where there's scary noises and buzzing and people running around sometimes because labor and delivery can get a little hectic sometimes. So we had the cutest thing where this big brother was coming to meet his little sister for the first time, and he showed up with a balloon and a toy for her, and she had a toy for him. And we asked the family, do you want us to film this for you? So we filmed it for them. And it's so funny because the postnatal care specialist that was filming it was literally like in tears crying, and you could hear her kind of sobbing in the
Oh my
background.
goodness.
But it's moments like that that just really hit home, and you're like, okay, this is why we're doing this. And we had a guest a few weeks ago that when she was checking out, she made me cry because
Oh,
she grabbed me as she was leaving and she gave me this big hug, and she said, "You know what, Jen?" She goes, "We checked in as two people with a baby, but we're checking out as parents."
oh,
Oh,
yeah.
I
That'll
mean,
make
I'm
me cry
tearing
right
up.
now.
I know. I was like, you have to warn me before you say something like that. Like that
Yeah.
was, oh, it was so amazing. But that's what I want to see. I want to see people. Yeah, it is hard. It's still going to be tough. I'm not saying that the village is going to magically erase how hard postpartum is, but to make it to where it's not a traumatic event in your life. And if something does happen, if you do develop postpartum preeclampsia, or we've had some guests that had like their bleeding was not under control and they had mild hemorrhaging, where we were like, that doesn't look like the normal amount of bleeding. You should contact your provider. Stuff like that happens without having somebody there to let you know this is normal, this is not normal. It could turn into something a lot more serious. So I think for us, being able to help them make it a positive experience when you look back over it, is yeah, that was really hard, but wasn't it just so amazing?
Yeah. That's the hope, right? We're never going to
Mhm.
take the hardness out of parenthood. It's just
No.
kind of part of that journey. But
Mhm.
we can make it easier on you. Are there medical professionals at the village, Jen?
Our IBCLCs, a lot of them are registered nurses. We have a couple midwives that come by that check in. One of them is a CNM, but we don't do any medical procedures. I'm a nurse, but I don't do any kind of medical procedures either. And nothing as far as if something were to come up, we're always going to refer them back to their provider at the hospital. There are people there that are medically trained, but we're not doing any kind of medical services there.
Sure. And how long is someone's typical stay at the village?
We are seeing a typical stay is about 5 to 6 nights.
Oh,
And then, interestingly enough, we've had a lot of people that checked in that first week when they're in that survival mode, where they're like, oh my gosh, this is not what I was expecting. How do you change a diaper? My baby, what do we do? And so they're there for about a week and then they go home. And then we have a lot of them that come back at like
wow.
week 5 or 6, and they do another week with us. And it's so funny when they check back in, literally they walk in, they're like, okay, let's take the baby to the nursery. We need a nap. When's my massage? When is dinner coming? It's like they come in now with a, okay, we feel good about the baby, but now we need to like nurture ourselves. And so it's more of a vacation stay in that, which I love. And I love to see that because one, it makes me feel good that they're coming back because they obviously enjoyed their first stay with us, but the second stay is very different.
Yeah. It makes it easier to be a good parent, to show up fully, to be present, to
Mhm.
work on yourself, to have hard conversations, to advocate for yourself when you're well rested. You can't
Mhm.
really do that. You can't really make sound decisions and feel confident in your abilities if you are just so worn out.
Yeah.
All right, so I think my last question is probably the one looming over everyone's head, which is how much is this going to cost us, and does insurance cover any of it?
The postnatal retreat centers that we're seeing that are opening across the United States, it varies in pricing. Surprisingly, we're one of the lowest priced ones in the United States. A lot of people tell me that like why is it $2,000 a night at this one, but then it's 890 with us. So ours start at $890 a night, and that includes your 24-hour doula care, your lactation visit, your visit with the family therapist. And then we also supply like all the baby's diapers. There's just a whole laundry list of things that you get for that price. As far as insurance covering it, that is something that we've been working really hard to get coverage. Now, I don't think an insurance company is going to ever like cover the cost of a hotel stay, but
Mm,
they will cover things like your lactation visit. They will cover things like your visit with the family therapist. Some of them will cover doulas.
mm,
So we definitely will try to work with them. We have a medical biller who sits down and will help them sort through that. And then even if they get $400 back, that chips away at that 890 price. So definitely encouraging people to do that. We also steer people in the direction of some of these baby registry companies that are
oh,
popping up,
yeah.
Be Her Village. Those are ones where you can just sign up for support. And then your family, instead of sending you like a blanket that you may or may not ever use, they can put it towards your stay at the village. We had one family in Mexico who they were unable to come up and be with their daughter when she had her baby. So the whole family got together and raised enough money between the whole family to book them for a 7 night stay at the
Wow.
village. hmm
That's
So that was their gift, was staying at the village. I think there's ways around it. We also take HSA. So that's another way. And then I really encourage people to look into, if they work for a company, to contact their employee benefits department and just ask them, like, hey, I'm having a baby, or my partner's having a baby. Do we have any postnatal or any kind of things that can go towards the pregnancy? And you'd be surprised at how many people don't even know that their companies will give them some compensation for this. So that's another area that I like to explore with people. So, yeah, I'm hoping that the more that we present this to insurance companies, the more that they're going to recognize it, because that's what's happened with doulas. Doulas were like, submit this to your insurance company. And then slowly, it took decades, but slowly they started to recognize, like, hey, this is a thing. So for us, that's my goal, is to have this covered. It's going to be a while because, like I said, we have to change the mindset culturally first to where we make this a thing where your postpartum is just as important as your pregnancy. Having people recognize, you know what, we shouldn't just be discharged from the hospital and then not have anybody check us out for 6 weeks.
yeah. Yeah. It should be supported time. It
Mhm,
should be that bridge that we've been talking about. Oh my
mhm.
gosh, Jen, this was just as much of a fabulous conversation as I had envisioned it to be.
Mhm.
I just fell in love with your idea and the support that you are giving from the moment that you told me about it. So, thank you so much for not only sharing it with me, but now sharing it with my audience and also
Yeah.
putting this idea out into the world. Thank you for starting this little fire that we have going in America.
Mhm.
Thank you for starting that because I think, just like you said, a lot of people forget about postpartum. And it's not
Mhm.
just us. It's not just the people that are pregnant. It's not just the people that are planning this. It's everybody kind of forgets about postpartum, from our support systems to our medical industry to parents to just our
Mhm.
society. Postpartum is forgotten. And if it weren't for people like you, I think that problem would only get worse. So I'm really happy to see that you are changing the waves of things and you are turning that around. Is there
Yeah.
anything that we didn't talk about that people need to know about either planning for postpartum or staying at the village or choosing a retreat center, anything?
I think that it's definitely something, like you said, people forget about it or they go into it thinking, like, oh, I don't think it'll be that bad. We'll just see how it goes. I think that starting to plan for your postpartum early on is going to be the key here. So during your pregnancy, maybe even putting if it's finances that's holding you back, like trying to maybe start a Venmo or go to a baby registry and start to build that so that you have that support. Don't wait until you're in the postpartum period to then start figuring it out, because nobody has ever come to me and said, I felt like I had too much support. That's just not a thing. Having that support system and then seeking out, like, the postnatal retreat centers are popping up all over the United States. There's a couple in DC, New York. I believe there's one in Seattle now. And then we have ours in San Francisco. There's some in LA. So they're popping up all over. So I would say do some research on that. We've had people come stay with us from other states that have flown in. So I would say maybe think about that. Even if there isn't one in your city, you won't do it like right after you give birth, but usually after your 2-week appointment, if your pediatrician gives you the green light and says it's okay to travel, or maybe you do it in 4 weeks or even 8 weeks after your baby has their first round of shots, if that's what you want to do, you can still do the retreat center. I feel like people go, it's too late. Like, I've already had my baby. My baby's a month old. I don't need this. No, you still need it, because postpartum is forever.
And too much support does not exist. That on
No.
the head, as no one has
Yeah.
ever said, man, I'm pretty overwhelmed with all the support I have. I
Yeah.
feel like I have too much,
Yeah.
You never
Doesn't
hear that.
happen.
Yeah,
Doesn't
exactly.
happen. Yeah. And it's okay to ask for support. I feel like there's a lot of guilt associated with that. And I always praise my parents whenever they do ask for support, because to me that's a sign of a good parent, somebody who's wanting to provide the best that they can for their baby. And asking for help is one of the best things you can do for your baby. It's not that anybody is judging you and thinking like, oh, this person's asking for me to help them change a diaper, so I guess they don't want to do that. No, nobody's thinking that way. But I think the mom guilt is real. We feel like people are going to think that we're a bad parent if we just don't do it all. But I think that you're being a good parent when you ask for support.
Same. I'm definitely judging you when you ask for support, and it's, damn, that's a good parent. Judging
Mm-hmm.
hard. I hope I can be that
Yeah.
good of a parent. And then I
Yeah.
judge myself.
Good
I'm like,
judgment.
dang, I hope I can live up
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah. And it's okay. I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of that guilt associated with it. So
Yeah.
we just need to stop that. We need to stop putting people down that are asking for help, and yeah, stop that judgment.
Totally. Ask for help, you guys. And look, there's a lot of people out there that want to help you,
Mhm.
that aren't going to invite themselves into your space. So it really does come down to you saying, I think I need a little help. And people like Jen and I will be like, we're here. What do you need? Let us help
Yes.
you.
Hmm.
Jen, if people wanted to learn more about the village, connect with you, look
Hmm.
into Golden Gate Doulas, look into a stay at the village, where do they connect with you? Where can they find information on all of those things?
So we're on all the social media platforms, and obviously you can just Google the Village Postnatal Retreat Center. It should pop up. Golden Gate Doulas has been around for years and years. We support about 700 families a year at Golden Gate, so it's a lot. So yeah, definitely on social media. I believe Instagram for Golden Gate is just at Golden Gate Doulas. And then for the village, we have a TikTok, which is VPRC3, or you can just type in the village. And I'm sure you'll probably add some tags too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Village Postnatal Retreat Center and Golden Gate Doulas, those two companies, if you go to one website, it will link you to the other.
Nice. All right, you guys. I will see everyone in the next episode. Jen, truly thank you so much for being here today. You've shared so much wisdom about things that we should truly be thinking about, planning for, preparing for in postpartum, rather than just get your nursery ready and make a birth
Mhm.
plan and only focus on the birth. And so you've also given us a really awesome solution to that, something that hopefully catches on in our country and becomes the new norm, because the norm that we
Mhm.
have right now isn't really cutting it. I really appreciate you being here, and I know our listeners have enjoyed their time with you today.
Yeah.
You guys, be sure to follow Jen on social media. You can find me at Tranquility by HeHe on all platforms or the.birth.lounge on Instagram. Until next time, head to your app store and download the Birth Lounge app for evidence-based childbirth education and data-driven postpartum support delivered straight to your phone. Bye! Thank you so much for tuning in today. I truly do value this community and I love hanging out with you. You deserve to have a birth that you love with a provider that values your autonomy and respects informed consent. It's an honor to be your go-to gal when it comes to preparing for your baby. If you found today's episode helpful, share it with a friend. Share it with someone who could use evidence-based information to help them have an informed and confident birth. I'd love to hear what you have to say and read your sweet words. By leaving us a review, you are helping other expectant mamas and their families find the podcast so that we can reduce birth trauma and improve maternity care in the U.S. one birth at a time. If you're interested in joining the Birth Lounge, go to thebirthlounge.com. If you want to connect with me on socials, you can find me at Tranquility by HeHe on all platforms. Until next time, stay educated, stay supported, stay confident. Bye!